Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being here with us today for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan webinar. This is the 11th in our Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19 webinar series. These webinars are being recorded and will be available for review on our website approximately 24 hours after the session. Today's webinar is a review of the EIDL, including the latest updates to the program. The Small Business and Technology Development Center is an SBA partner and provides technical assistance to applicants as well as other business recovery and resiliency counseling. I'm Bob Weston, the SBTDC statewide COVID-19 Business Recovery and Resiliency Program Director. This is a CARES Act funded initiative expanding Small Business and Technology Development Center's capacity to assist businesses in successfully navigating the COVID-19 crisis. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Byron Hicks, the SBTDC Executive State Director. Byron was named the State Director of the Small Business and Technology Development Center in January of 2021. He also serves as Assistant Vice Chancellor of Business and Technology Extension Programs in the Office of External Affairs, Partnerships, and Economic Development at NC State University. The SBTDC is the Business and Technology Extension of the University of North Carolina system. For over 36 years, the SBTDC has been a resource for business owners, providing confidential counseling, educational programs, and a connection to university resources to make them help their businesses better. The SBTDC operates 10 regional centers across the state that are hosted by our UNC system campuses, with 16 offices serving all 100 North Carolina counties. The business resiliency counselors are now embedded with each of our regional centers. I'd like to turn the program over now to Business Resiliency Counselor Jackie Roth and our Business Recovery and Resiliency Program EIDL team.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the overview. As he mentioned, Mark Everett, Chad Smith, and I comprise the EIDL Deep Dive team, which is a part of the overall Business Resiliency Team program. If you have any questions, whether it's about EIDL or any of the other relief programs administered by the SBA, I encourage you to reach out to your local BRC team member. I haven't been advancing the slides. So this map shows who's in each region. If you go to sbtdc.org, click on the Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19. From there, just under the top portions, you'll see a box that says News. To the right of that is a Connect with the Business Resiliency Counselor button. If you click on that, you'll get full contact information for each one of the business resiliency counselors that you see on the map here. So to better serve our clients that may have unique circumstances or that may require some additional expertise when navigating some of these applications, that's the reason that we've formed these deep dive teams. So I wanted to take a moment and introduce our team, the EIDL team, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan team. We're the three that have the deepest expertise in this program. So I wanted to introduce Mark Everett and Chad Smith. Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Everett, and I'm one of the business resiliency counselors on the team at East Carolina University, along with my colleague, Rob Bauer. My background is primarily banking and commercial real estate. Thank you all for joining us today.
Shad, go right ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chad Smith. I'm with the group in Greensboro, North Carolina A&T. And my background prior to joining SBTDC as a business resiliency counselor was in export management and a considerable period of time also in banking and finance. Happy to be here with you today.
And I'm Jackie Roth, and I am located at the NC State Regional Center. And I've been with the SBTDC for just under a year and was a consultant for nearly 10 years, doing mergers and acquisitions consulting prior to that. So just as we go forward, just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Mark, and he'll do the meat of the presentation. So first, as Bob mentioned, we are going to record and share the link to the record or the presentation, and we're also going to provide the slide deck afterwards. So the presentation itself, we're going to present the latest updates of the EIDL program, as well as the basic elements around eligibility, terms of the loan, acceptable uses of funds, repayments, reconsiderations, and then the supplemental and targeted advance portions of the program, kind of in their own little subset. We'd like to keep this conversational and kind of free-flowing and informative. So we encourage you to enter in any questions that you may have in the Q&A box, or if you feel comfortable, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that. We'll allow a little bit of time as we move from slide to slide. So if you have questions about any particular topic as we go along, please feel free, and we'll pause and address those. We will go into some frequently asked questions at the end of the presentation. So if we don't get to your question, we'll have time at the end. So lastly, we'll provide a list of additional resource partners, organizations that we collaborate with that can also provide support for you, whether it's related to EIDL or any of the other business challenges that you may be facing. And really, we're all in it to help you make your business better. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Everett.
Good deal. Thank you, Jackie. So a little bit about the the EIDL eligibility. A business needed to be in business prior to February 15th of 2020. As of today, the program is set to expire on December 31st of this year. When you apply, applications are being processed on a first come, first served basis, which is pretty typical of how the SBA processes those. Eligible applicant businesses include businesses with 500 or fewer employees. Agricultural enterprises are eligible, also with 500 or fewer employees. Most of the nonprofits, as well as faith-based organizations, and of course, sole proprietors and independent contractors, as well as landlords. Next slide, please.
Yeah, just one little note about that. Right now, the SBA is taking somewhere, and this is a little bit of a guess, but probably processing times are in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 weeks. And they have reassured us that because these are a different funding for these funds, that funds will not run out, at least for the foreseeable future. So, but we definitely encourage you to move on this quickly. Sooner is better.
Good deal. Ineligible business types. The first one is probably no surprise. If you're engaged in illegal activities, you wouldn't be eligible. Things where you're speculating, lending, gambling, that kind of thing that are listed here would not be eligible businesses under the EIDL program. All right. Talk about terms a little bit, and I'll preface the comments. You can see them here, but understandably, you want to pursue the funding that's available that doesn't have to be repaid, and we understand that. But I would also submit to you that as these other programs are running out of funding or coming to a close, the EIDL program is a very attractive program, because where else can you borrow permanent working capital for your business under such favorable terms? The rate for small businesses is 3.75% fixed for the term of the loan and 2.75% for nonprofits. The repayments are very aggressive, up to 30 years with no prepayment penalty or fees. And again, the purpose is to meet financial obligations and operating expenses that could have been met but for the COVID disaster. Again, working capital type needs. So what are the changes that have recently occurred? Beginning in early April 6th, the SBA raised the loan limit for the COVID program from 6 months of economic injury and a maximum loan amount of $150,000. That is now up to 24 months of economic injury and a maximum loan amount of $500,000. If you got a loan that was approved prior to April 7th for less than $500,000, chances are you're eligible for an increase based on these new amounts that were announced on March 24th. And obviously that's subject to their underwriting and demonstrated ability to repay. If you received a loan subject to the previous loan limits, you are eligible to submit a request for an increase. And right now the SBA is reaching out to folks via email to give you details about how you can request an increase. Just as a side note, we all know there's a lot of scammers and hackers and so forth. Just make sure that any email you're responding to has come from sba.gov, at sba.gov, or also updates at sba.gov. How can you use your idle funds? Well, like we said in the earlier slide, basically for working capital. That would comprise normal operating expenses that you would otherwise incur in your business: payroll, benefits, healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, and so forth, fixed debt payments. What you cannot use idle funds for would be to pay off or refinance existing debt or to prepay that debt. It's designed for you to make the regularly scheduled payments on that existing debt. You also aren't allowed to purchase capital assets, and that would include vehicles. You can't construct or do upfit, expand your building, that kind of thing. It's designed really to be working capital. And part of that is because by law, the SBA disaster loans are not allowed to compete with your private sector lenders. It's also a really good idea to keep your idle funds in a separate account. If you commingle those with your normal operating funds, it will make it very difficult for you to demonstrate and document how and what you use those funds for if you were requested to document that. So keep those in a separate account from your normal operating account. Another big change on the repayment on the idle loans, and this actually came up with a couple of clients in the late last week. So repayment of loans made in the calendar year 2020 will have their first payment due date extended from 12 months from the note date to 24 months from the note date. And that's a big relief, as most businesses are still impacted by what's going on. Likewise, loans made in calendar year 2021 are going to have a first payment due date extended from 12 months from note date to 18 months from note date. Generally speaking, you're going to receive your amortization schedule after your loan is advanced and funded. That'll come from the servicing department. They do not generally debit your account for the payments. You get notified prior to them doing that, but you also may want to get ahead of that and request to pay by mail or online. So applying for the EIDL program is pretty flexible. The website shown here, sba.gov/disaster, is probably the easiest and quickest way for most people. You also can call their customer service center during the times and at the phone number listed on the slide here. The email address is disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. And there's also the 800 number for the hearing impaired.
Mark, before we continue, I kind of wanted to open it up. We had a question in the chat. So the situation is that a business applied and they sent DocuSign for the second owner to sign electronically the documents, and it sounds like it's kind of lost. So they're getting emails regarding the loan being withdrawn if that second owner doesn't send that, but they're not seeing that, if I'm understanding. And Carla, go ahead and unmute if I'm not quite understanding the question correctly. But they're just looking for input, whether it's going to mess up the application process if they were to resubmit a new application, which that's kind of my thought. So I think the best way, like to get some clarity, and we can take this offline with you, Carla, but just wanted to kind of open it up to you, Mark and Shad, if you had any thoughts on if they're not getting that and there's just not good communication around that, and they can't get clarity on how to address that. I'm not sure if it's maybe a mismatch in the email address or anything related to that.
Do you want me to clarify a little more first?
Please go right ahead.
Okay. So we applied and were approved, like I said, and the first owner got the DocuSign email and he went through and signed everything. And the second owner we seem to think he never got an email to DocuSign it. We've gone back and had his previous emails restored to see if he missed it or accidentally deleted it. We can't find anything. So we've been calling the disaster customer service 800 number. We started calling, and this has been going on for weeks now. And at first they would bring our loan up and say that they couldn't even see the signatures from the first owner. They would say, well, you say you signed it, but we can't see it. They couldn't see the signature. So we kind of just kept checking and kept calling. And finally, we got a hold of someone that said, yes, I can see the signatures of the first owner. But we still can't get them to send a link for the second owner to sign it via DocuSign.
Okay.
They said, so this last week, they said that they were going to resend the links for them to just kind of start over, both of them, and re-sign. And it still is exactly the same. They haven't resent anything. They like send a link and then you click on it, to continue your application. And when we do that, it goes into our account and it still shows the same old signatures. And that's only going to the first owner. The link is still not going to the second owner. So I talked to him this morning and said, well, maybe I could just start a whole new application and kind of redo the whole thing, but I don't want to mess it up even more.
Right.
So any advice you have would be great.
Okay. Well, we've got, it may go to the same, it may route to the same place as this toll-free number, but we can provide an alternative phone number to reach out. And then we can also reach out to our area regional manager with the SBA and get some input on, since yours is such a specific situation. So we'll connect with you offline and follow up with you and try and give you a little more guidance on that now that we kind of understand what your situation is. Sounds good? Okay. Let's move on to the next one, because I don't know, we've got another one.
There's another question there about format. Someone's asking about what format of documents does SBA require they receive to submit an EIDL spending. I'm not sure what, I think you're talking about submitting an EIDL loan.
I think it's after the money has been spent to substantiate that. I was going to wait until we get a little further in.
Okay.
We'll come back to that one.
I think we
That's fine.
addressed that a little bit later in a couple of slides.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll come to that.
Good.
All right, go ahead and keep going, Mark.
All right. Well, it kind of touches on a little bit of the question we just had. A loan can be declined at any point in the process. The potential reasons for you to be declined would include those listed: credit history, maybe not an eligible business type. If you've had character issues, meaning felony or fraud in the past, maybe they cannot verify the information or substantiate the economic injury. Those would be various reasons. And the question that we had earlier would just be, I'm glad you've continued to follow up on that, because it can be declined if you fail to proceed. So the fact that you're responding hopefully bodes well for us to be able to put you in the right place to get that resolved. If you are declined, you're going to get an email or a letter from the SBA stating the reason why you were declined, as well as information on how to request a reconsideration. Once you've been declined, you get up to 6 months after the date of the decline in order to provide a written reconsideration request. And the reconsideration request should be emailed to the email address there, pdcrecons@sba.gov. If you're declined a second time, you get an additional 30 days to appeal that second decline. So if you do submit a reconsideration request, there's some suggested information that you would supply. The first would be a copy of the decline letter and a short letter from you explaining the basis for your request for reconsideration. Right now, another thing might be that you maybe had not filed your 2020 returns and now have. I would go ahead and include the most recent return that you filed. They want to see a copy of your government issued ID, the form 3502, which is the SBA form, which outlines your revenues and cost of goods sold. If you haven't, I would certainly include the 4506T, which requests your transcripts for your previously filed returns. And then if you've had a credit issue, you've had a credit issue, I would recommend you submit evidence showing that you've gotten that on track, that you're now repaying your loans, or that you have satisfied whatever it was on your business credit or personal credit that may have led to the decline. It may also be wise to submit the form 2202, which is a schedule of your liabilities, just so that they can understand what all you've got out there. All right, so what we've been talking about was the EIDL loan program, which is a loan that has to be repaid. The targeted EIDL advance is a grant program, and those funds do not have to be repaid. So you could potentially qualify for an advance of up to $10,000. And this would be for applicants in low-income communities who previously received some portion of the original EIDL advance, or you applied but didn't receive any because they had run out of funding. There's no action you need to take on your part. The SBA is going to reach out first to applicants who received between $1,000 and $9,000. And then they're going to reach out to those who applied but did not receive the advance, and your application was on or before December 27 of 2020. Like I said, you don't need to take any action. The SBA will contact you. And once again, all that communication will be sent from an official account at sba.gov.
And before we move on, just a point of clarity, the original EIDL Advance program is no longer available. So the targeted EIDL Advance and we're going to get to in this next slide, the supplemental targeted advance. Those are the only two current and active programs. So the original is again no longer available. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yep, correct. Thanks, Jackie. So as an applicant, you may qualify for the targeted advance if you live in a low income community, and the link to the mapping tool is what the SBA is using to determine whether you're in a low-income census tract, and as defined by the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code. Also, you have to be able to demonstrate a greater than 30% reduction in revenue during an 8-week period that began on March 20, 2020 or later. And that would be compared to the same 8-week period in the prior year in 2019. If you meet those criteria of low-income community or the criteria of low-income community, they're going to ask you to provide your monthly revenue from all sources to confirm that 30% reduction. And there again, it would be any 8-week period on or after March 20th as compared to the same period in 2019. Likewise, your business has to have 300 or fewer employees, and any entities that would normally be eligible for EIDL program could potentially be eligible for this targeted advance. However, agricultural enterprises are not eligible for the targeted advance. So Jackie mentioned the supplemental targeted advance, and this was something that was effective by the SBA on April 22nd. And this supplemental targeted advance is an additional $5,000 over and above the $10,000. So like the other advance, this does not have to be repaid, and it was designed to reach the smallest and hardest hit businesses that would be eligible for it. Even if you got the full $10,000 under the EIDL advance and or the targeted advance, if you meet the eligibility requirements, you would potentially be able to get another $5,000, but the total of what you received under the advance can't exceed $15,000.
Mark, just on this one, I believe an additional requirement is that the business have 10 or fewer employees.
Right. Yep. We're going to cover that on the next slide, but that's
okay.
Correct. Again, under the supplemental targeted advance, a small business needs to meet all of the criteria as listed here on this slide. You've got to be located in a low-income community using that same mapping tool as on the targeted advance. Instead of a 30% reduction, you have to prove at least a 50% or greater than 50% economic loss during an 8-week period in 2020, March 2nd, 2020 or later, as compared to the same period in the previous year. And like with the other, if you qualify based on the low income census tract, you're gonna need to provide all your revenue and be able to document that greater than 50% economic loss during that 8-week period. And this is what Shad was referring to. Any business under the supplemental targeted advance needs to have 10 or fewer employees, and that would be any business type that would be eligible. But again, agricultural businesses, farmers, ranchers, they are not eligible for the supplemental targeted advance. They can still apply for a loan under the COVID EIDL program, but they are not eligible for the supplemental advance. And completing the targeted advance application is a requirement to be considered. So if you received word from SBA that you were eligible for the targeted advance, you needed to have filled out that application in order to potentially be eligible for the supplemental targeted advance. And again, they're reaching out to the businesses who may qualify.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. That covers kind of the two facets. So the kind of grant portion with the supplemental and targeted advance program, as well as kind of the primary EIDL loan program. So kind of two facets to it, but we wanted to get this information to you. It's been out, a lot of this has been out for, a good number of months, but there have been some recent changes that we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. So at this time, I think we can go ahead and open it up for Q&A, and we do have one that has come into the chat, but feel free to add any questions as they've popped into your head. And if we get into real specific situations that aren't going to necessarily apply to the group as a whole or be beneficial, then we'll kind of take those real specific questions offline. But we do have a question, Mark, it kind of ties in with, I think, some of the documentation, but the question is, what format or documentation does the SBA require that they receive to substantiate the idle spending? So after the loan has been done, the funds have been spent, and I know your recommendation was to keep these funds separate and not commingle them. So that's an easy first start. But I'm going to open it up to you guys to kind of give some guidance on that question. Again, just what documentation do you believe the SBA is going to require to substantiate the spending on eligible uses of the funds?
Yeah, I would say the first step being, if you keep it in a separate account, just keep good records with your bank statements and make sure that you're able to provide, if not copies, most people get, electronic copies of their checks, their cleared checks. But to me, that would be the most the easiest way, is just to show that you paid, your landlord this amount of money out of this account that contains your idle funds. To some extent, that's going to be able to tie back to your income statement, just to verify what you paid through the course of the year. But I think as far as direct documentation of how you spent those funds, bank statements, obviously, depending on how you run your business, how you book, how your bookkeeping system is, it may be that you transferred, $10,000 from your idle account to your payroll account to pay your payroll. There again, I would just keep good records about those transfers and be able to document that this particular amount of money went to pay my payroll. That would be, to me, the easiest and most demonstrable way to show that to the SBA.
I think what I would add to that is that I would say the key to that is just understanding what the funds can be used for. And the funds can be used for working capital and normal operating expenses. So keep in mind that if you use it to pay utility bills, you use it to pay rent, or if you use it for healthcare benefit for your staff, make sure, just like Mark is saying, that as you go along, you can document and substantiate the usage of the funds. That brings you right back to being in total compliance. It makes it very easy so that when any questions are asked about it, you'll be in line to produce those documents and show that you are in compliance with what the funds are, the other funds are intended for. So that would be a good place to start.
Yep, very good. Those are all good recommendations. In general, think of it very similar. So as both Mark and Shad said, keep very good records. You may even want to set aside or start, maybe a dedicated Excel spreadsheet that kind of starts with the loan amount, and as you start using those funds, document that by date and what the spend was on, and then have maybe a folder in your computer where you're providing copies, PDF copies of checks and bank statements and supporting documents. Think of it similar to if you were to be audited by the IRS, any of your deductions, you may not be asked to require that, but as long as you have it available, you'll be ready and prepared and organized. So that's all good advice. Any other questions, Shad? Any other things that you've seen that we can kind of bring up?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions that have come up, and I thought would be a good place to start. Some of them we have had clients inquire about them, and some we just have come across them. We feel that it's important to help us re-emphasize the major points in the presentation. One of them, the first one I want us to consider is the question that, can I apply for COVID-19 EIDL loan if I already received other benefits like the PPP first draw, second draw? Can I still qualify for EIDL loan, or can I apply for it? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. And we see that coming up often because clients have already benefited from the PPP, which is on the way out, and they are still in balance as to whether they could qualify for EIDL as well. So the answer to the question is yes, you can still also qualify. I think there are a few issues there when it comes to a bit of a catch, and that is you cannot use the same basis for your qualification, or you cannot go back and use the same purpose that enable you to qualify for a PPP or some other SVOG, the shutter value, or the restaurant RRF revitalization fund. They all, you cannot keep qualifying for each of these different programs using the same basis or the same purpose or the same call, the same specific injury. So you have to have a different need, a different specification for that. And that's what we want to make sure clients understand that. And if you do understand that, you may be able to qualify for one or the other programs. So that's one of the questions we have been addressing more recently. Another one that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we do have another question that's kind of related to eligibility. And that is, my business is home-based and services have been provided in, the services have been provided in low-income communities. Do you need a letter from the low-income communities, and what do you suggest in getting approved for the targeted supplemental grant? So we've got a couple things going on there, and I may reverse the slides and go back, but the first part of that is the address, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mark and Shad. So the low income eligibility for the targeted EIDL advance is based on that map, but that is based on your business's location, not your customer or your client's service base.
Right.
Right.
So,
And Jackie, I had this question, it's not exactly analogous, but somewhat similar. We had a question come up late last week that I spoke to Patrick about, where the business who was applying for the targeted advance is set up through the Secretary of State, and his primary business location is located in a non-low income census tract, and he was not eligible. The question was, if you have a different facility where you manufacture, for example, that is located in a low income census tract, would that be a basis for reconsideration? And the answer was, we don't know. It would potentially be something that they could review, but my understanding is the basis of it is where your business is located, not where you're providing the services.
and the second part of that is the targeted EIDL advance. So that is a program where you're not applying, but the SBA is going to proactively reach out to those businesses that are within their system, that they believe to be located in these low income areas that may have demonstrated that loss that is part of that eligibility. It's not 100% accurate, so you do need to go to that. If you do receive those emails, you need to look at that and determine whether you are in fact eligible. Like I said, they have some pre-screening that they'll send emails to those that they believe are eligible, but you do need to review the qualifications and the eligibility to make sure, and then you'll have the ability, and there'll be within those emails instructions on how to go ahead and proceed with that. But there is that built in within the email. They'll have the link to the mapping tool to determine if you are located, and you enter in your address based on where your business is located. But that again is not necessarily an application process. Anything to add to that, either Mark or Shad?
Yeah, the last thing I will add to that is that your business will receive an email, but that is not an automatic approval or an automatic indication that you are going to get the targeted or the supplemental targeted advance. I had a client who received the email and thought that she automatically qualified, but she didn't, because after the SBA had gone out and done the remapping and evaluated where her business was, she didn't qualify. So it's like 2 or 3 step process. You first get the email, and then they come back and notify you, and then there'll be a disbursement. So the receipt of the email is not automatic approval. Just be aware of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Shad. Do you have any other questions that have come in that are around eligibility?
Around eligibility, yes. I have a business partner, but he or she does not want to be included on the EIDL application. Can I still apply? And that's one that also comes up under the FAQ for SBA, but that has also come up too with us. And so the answer to that is the application must be accompanied by at least 20% or more of the business it must be accompanied or signed and submitted by whoever owns at least 20% or more of the business. And the aggregate must be that there must be 80% ownership represented, okay? There must be 80% ownership represented in the application. So what it means is that if your partner owns 20% of the business, and that partner, 20% or more, and that partner is not willing to join the application, then that creates a problem automatically. So you need to have a situation where 80% ownership is represented in the application. So that's one of the questions that have come up.
So if as long as your business partner has 20% or more, they would have to co-apply.
Right.
So, and if you don't have consensus on that, then that's not going to fly. That application will not go through and be processed. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, Shad, any other questions around eligibility or maybe requesting an increase in funds? Because that's been a new change. So that's kind of a lot of activity, or probably questions that we might get.
Yeah, I think the one we should consider is, what if I didn't accept the full amount? Like Mark mentioned in the presentation, the maximum amount was recently adjusted from 150,000 to 500,000, and some applicants may not need the full amount, and they may choose a lower amount, and subsequently realize that they want more than they initially signed up for. So the question that is being presented is, can the client or applicant revert to SBA to benefit from any increase? And the answer to that is yes. Within 2 years from the time the loan is approved, you can come back and ask for more. So that is an opportunity that clients need to be aware of.
As an example, so if somebody received the maximum of 150,000 as it was first set as a cap, now the maximum loan amount is now 500,000. So if you received a sizable loan or even up to the 150, you can now go back and request additional funds
Right,
at this time.
right.
And you should be also, that is a process that if you are an existing applicant borrower, you'll be getting an email from the SBA asking if you have interest in that, and then it'll include the steps to do that. But you can go through that process, sign into your portal, and then kind of go through that request process for increasing your loan amount. And then you should, again, hopefully they're processing these in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 weeks. We don't have full clarity on that because they are still processing, the first batch that has requested increases. So as we learn more about the specific time frame for application processing, we'll definitely update folks on that as we get a little more clarity on that.
And
All right.
Jackie, I would just add to that the message of the day is just exercise patience and diligence. The SBA is handling a tremendous level of inquiries and applications, and they're trying to process them as quickly as they can, but just be diligent and patient. And that was the word from SBA as of Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, and
Good advice.
that's great. I wanted to interject. I know in the case of Carla, she made it clear that they have gone back and scrubbed the emails to ensure that there was not an email mix. But just for all of us on the call, especially our colleagues, business residency counselors or general business counselors that may come across clients who have a similar situation, I would strongly recommend that our first step is to encourage them to do exactly what Carla has done, because last week I had a client who had a similar situation to what Carla just described to us. And I was on a call with him and we just said, let's take some time and let's go through the email. And business owner, he got tons of stuff coming in. Some he doesn't even want to read, the spam and all of that. So after 10 or 15 minutes on a call with the client, he discovered that the SBA had sent him an email like 3 weeks earlier. And so he was able to, in fact, we thought it was going to be an hour conversation. It ended up being less than 30 minutes because the minute he found the email, we said, hey, act on it right now. Let's move forward. And that was it. So that's always my recommendation. The first step, scrub your email and make sure that the information you're looking for hasn't already come from the SBA.
Great. Good insight. Carrying on with the kind of increase topic, I think we've covered a couple of these questions. I think we've got maybe one more in that section, correct, Chad?
Yeah, this one
Something
where
about consolidating
the question of whether if I get another disaster loan due to a different disaster event, can I consolidate the new loan with my COVID-19 EIDL, or can I use the COVID-19 EIDL to pay off the old loan, anything of that nature? And the SBA has said no, because each of these disaster loans are geared toward a specific type of event. And the EIDL loan application or the EIDL loan process we're going through right now, which expires in December of this year, is purely driven towards addressing the issues surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. So applicants are prohibited from using either funds to pay off another loan or vice versa. The recommendation or the principle SBA holds to is that we must use the funds for its intended purpose. So that makes it clear we cannot consolidate across, do some cross payment as far as the funding or the allocations are concerned.
Yes, and I'll add to that, as Mark mentioned earlier, when we were discussing eligible uses of the funds, on the reverse of that. So EIDL loan proceeds cannot be used to compete with private sector lending. So
Right.
again, kind of going back, it cannot be used to pay off other loan amounts. So that's in direct, that'll be a miscompliance there. So hopefully we've been real clear on that. So let's talk about reconsideration. Any questions around that?
Yeah, I just look at my clock and will press for time. I really would like us to get 1 or 2 reconsideration questions in. The first one I think we should talk about is where the loan has already been, or the reconsideration has already been requested, and the deadline is fast approaching. What happens? And the answer to that is that once your reconsideration is in the pipeline, whether the December 31st deadline comes and meet that process still ongoing, you will still be considered. So there should be no fear of that. I know we are a bit further away from that, but it's good to know in advance that once your reconsideration is in the pipeline, it will get processed irrespective of the December 2021 deadline.
Yeah, that's very good. And in lieu of the time, I think we have covered most of the questions that have come in, and I haven't seen any new ones come into the Q&A box. So I think we're going to go ahead and pause there and then turn it back over to Bob. But anybody on the call that may have some special circumstances that needs discussion, again, going back to the map at the middle, and again, we'll share the slide deck and a recording of this presentation. But I encourage you to reach out to your local business resiliency counselor team. And again, you can find that at sbtdc.org. You click on the Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19. And from there, you will see about a third of the way down the page to the right, it'll have a connect with the business resiliency counselor team, and it'll have a list of all of our contact names and contact information. So you'll be able to reach out directly. And if it's something real specific to EIDL or any of the other programs, that team can reach out to the local experts. Again, Shad, Mark, and I are deep dive experts in the EIDL program. But if you do have questions around any of the other programs, your local BRC, business resiliency counselor, can connect you with that if they can't directly answer those questions. So either way, we'll get you an answer as quickly as you can. So Bob, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
You're on mute.
Thanks, Jackie and Mark and Shad. We appreciate it. Lots of good questions and answers there, and a good overview. The EIDL program is very attractive, low interest working capital disaster loan. Can't be used for expanding your business or for paying off other loans, but as you're building your business back after the COVID-19 pandemic, it could be one of your best sources for working capital for doing that. It's really intended to cover those business expenses that operating capital expenses that you weren't able to pay because of COVID-19. We'd like to thank all of our partners, the U.S. Small Business Administration, North Carolina District Office, our women's business centers across the state that are also providing technical assistance to clients, SCORE, the Veterans Business Opportunity Center, and also not SBA funded, but great partners with us are the 58 North Carolina Community College Small Business Centers, and we'd like to thank them. Our next webinar is coming up on May 27th, and it's going to be presented by the UNC School of the Arts Media Lab, Metal Lab, and their residency and immersive storytelling program. This is an exciting session that will explore technology solutions that may benefit your organization and company operations as it relates to productivity, collaboration, and culture by deploying technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality. This is our second year working with this program, and a very exciting residency. They actually doubled the number of residents in this program, and we'd encourage you to attend. Really forward-looking, cutting-edge use of technology. This webinar, the recording and slides will be posted online at www.sbtdc.org/coronavirus/webinars.html. You don't really need to remember all that long URL. If you go to the SBTDC website, click on the banner at the top of the page that says Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19, and just scroll down to webinars, and you can see all of the recordings and actually see the past recordings and the upcoming webinars. The SBTDC is administered by NC State University on behalf of the University of North Carolina System. It's funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. To make an appointment with an SBTDC resiliency counselor to discuss any of the COVID-19 business relief programs, or just to get general counseling on helping your business move forward, help with exporting, help with government contracting, any aspect of your business, go to www.sbtdc.org/ERFC, or at the bottom of any page on our website, look for the request counseling link. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you'll be with us for the next webinar.